What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this episode, we're going to be bringing you another endgame build, this time for the Lance. Now, an endgame build is a build that is constructed from some of the rarest armor, weaponry, and decorations in the game. They also feature talismans as well as Qurio crafting, but when it comes to the Qurio crafting, it's not to the extent where every armor features absolutely the rarest skills on them. Also, if you find these videos helpful, informative, or even entertaining, please consider leaving a like, as well as subscribing to the channel, as I try to bring you a variety of builds for a variety of different playstyles. Now when it comes to the Lance, it's traditionally one of the most defensive weapons in the game. However, with Sunbreak, thanks to the new counter attacks it has available to it, it can be quite strong when it comes to dealing out damage. And so with that, I present to you the general DPS Lance build. This build is all about dealing damage to a monster whilst using our counter attacks. This means that we can forego investing heavily into skills like guard, ultimately freeing up a lot of space for DPS skills. So, for the general DPS build, you'll need the Risen Kaiser Horns, the Risen Kaiser Mail, the Flaming Espinasse Grips, the Risen Kaiser Coil, and the Flaming Espinasse Heals. For your Petalace, either go with the Demon Petalace if you want extra damage, or Absolute Petalace if you want something a little bit more balanced with extra health. Personally, I'd go with the Absolute Petalace. As for the talisman, go with a talisman that has as much attack boost on it as possible. I'm using a talisman that has attack boost at level 3, a point in Razor Sharp, and a tier 2 decoration slot. As for your weapon, I'm going with the Dubhaze Asterism, which is the Lucent Nagakuga Lance, although you can use other lances with this build so long as it has decent raw attack and sharpness. As for the Qurio crafting augmentations, I'd go with a Rampage slot upgrade as well as an attack increase augmentation. And as for the Rampage skill, go with one of the anti-species decorations to increase your damage against certain monster types. And speaking of decorations, you've got a fair few to play around with. So first of all, I've gone for Shield Jewels. These are kind of optional in all honesty, but this will max out the Guard Up skill. I've then gone for Attack Jewels to max out attack boost, Brace Jewels for a few points in flinch free, Expert Jewels to max out Critical Eye, Critical Jewels to max out Crit Boost, Jumping Jewels for a few points in Evade Extender, Mastery Jewel to max out Master's Touch, Tenderizer Jewel to max out Weakness Exploit, and finally a Chain Jewel for a point in the Burst skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with a raw attack of 425, with a poison rating of 15. You also have a little bit of purple sharpness, as well as 40% base affinity. This can easily be 90% when we take into account Weakness Exploit. You also have a strong defense of 863 that is strong against fire and thunder, but unfortunately weaker to the other elements. As for your switch skills, I will recommend with this build taking the Insta Block skill as well as the Anchor Rage skill. Using Anchor Rage as well is also more beneficial when you have fewer points in guard, so you can get the maximum benefit from it. So as for the skills for this DPS build, first of all you have attack boost at level 7, increasing the raw attack of this build, and at level 4 or above grants us a percentage bonus to our raw attack. You then have Critical Eye at level 7, increasing the base affinity of this build. You then have Critical Boost at level 3. Increasing the damage of our attacks whenever they crit a monster, but only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental or ailment portion. But as this is a raw attack build, we benefit from this skill greatly. You'll then have Weakness Exploit at level 3, increasing our affinity whenever we're attacking monster weak points. This increase to our affinity can be up to 50% with Weakness Exploit at level 3. You'll then have Master's Touch at level 3, which prevents sharpness loss when we crit a monster. This can occur 80% of the time with Master's Touch at level 3. You'll then have Razor Sharp at level 3, preventing sharpness loss 50% of the time when we attack a monster. Master's Touch and Razor Sharps pretty much means that we're able to keep that small sliver of purple sharpness for long periods of time. You'll then have Guard Up at level 3, which to be honest is kind of optional, but I like to use it on this build. Guard Up is a skill that allows us to block unblockable attacks. It's a bit more of a quality of life skill with this build if we're not able to get out of the way of an incoming attack. You'll then have Flinch Free at level 3, which prevents all knockbacks and tripping effects on our hunters, not only from monsters but also our allies. You'll then have Burst at level 3, which is a skill that, when we're continuously attacking a monster, will gradually gain increased raw attack and elemental attack. You'll then have Powder Mantle at level 3, which is a skill that when we're continuously attacking a large monster, it will cause powder to form around our hunter. There can be two colours of this powder that forms. First of all, it will be red, which when we get hit from a monster, an explosion will occur on our hunter, dealing damage to that monster. However, this powder will eventually turn blue if we're not hit, to which when that occurs, when we land a hit ourselves on the monster, a larger explosion will occur instead. You'll then have spare shot at level 2, which is a byproduct of the armor we're using. This is a gunner skill, it's not needed on the lance build whatsoever. You'll then have evade extender at level 2, which increases the distance at which we dodge and evade, which to be honest is actually really useful for the lance. It also means that we don't always have to sheath our weapon when chasing down a monster. You'll then have Spirit Bird Call at level 1, which on this build unfortunately is technically at level 2, but regardless, Spirit Bird Call is a skill that allows our hunter to receive the effects of random spirit birds at fixed intervals, reducing the need for our hunter to go out of their way to find the spirit birds themselves, a great quality of life skill. You'll then have Intrepid Heart at level 2, which is a great defensive skill, go out of their way to find the spirit birds themselves, a great quality of life skill. You'll then have Intrepid Heart at level 2, which is a great defensive skill. This gives our hunter another bar above their health bar, which gradually fills up blue when you attack. When full, Intrepid Heart will become activated, after which, should you take a hit from a monster that would knock you back, that hit will instead be ignored and the damage from it reduced. On top of that, at level 2, when Intrepid Heart is activated, an explosion will detonate on our hunter, dealing extra damage to a monster. Anyway, next up is Ballistics at level 1, which again is another byproduct of the armor we're using and a gunner skill, it's not needed on the lance whatsoever. You'll then have Constitution at level 1, which is a byproduct of the Quirio's crafting, which reduces stamina depletion when we're evading, blocking and doing other certain actions. You'll then have Fortify at level 1, again a result of the Quirio's crafting, that when we faint and cart will come back with increased raw attack and defense. This buff can be applied twice to any one hunter during any hunt. And then finally you have Blood Right at level 1, again another byproduct of the Quirio's crafting, which when we're attacking a monster body part that has been broken, a portion of the damage dealt to that body part will be used to heal our hunter, so it is still quite a good skill. But those are all the core skills for this general DPS build for the lance. Let's move on to the next section where we talk about the Quirio's crafting. Now when it comes to the Quirio's crafting, I always tried to go for decoration augmentations, so upgrades to the various decoration slots on an armor piece or additional decoration slots. Rarely will I try to get absolute rare skills. Yes, there may be one or two, but for the most part I try to go for those decoration augmentations. So for the Risen Kaiser Horn, I've got an additional tier 1 decoration slot. For the Risen Kaiser Mel, I've got a point in Fortify skill. For the Flaming Espinasse Grips, I've got a point in Spirit Bird Core skill as well as an additional tier 1 decoration slot. For the Risen Kaiser Coil, I've got a point in the Constitution skill as well as the Blood Right skill and a reduction in the Ballistics skill. And then finally for the Flaming Espinasse Heals, I've got a tier 2 decoration slot upgrade, an additional tier 1 decoration slot and another point in the Spirit Bird Core skill, which is unfortunately wasted on this build. But every build out there has various pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect. Even these endgame builds have various negatives to counter their massive positives. Now when it comes to this general lance DPS build, its biggest pro is its damage output, able to bring down monsters quite quickly thanks to having massive raw attack. On top of that, this build also has amazing sharpness management. Thanks to having both Razor Sharp and Master's Touch coupled with high affinity, we're able to keep that sliver of purple sharpness for long periods of time and rarely drop below white sharpness. And then finally for the pros is that this build can be pretty much used against any monster out there. Rarely is a monster completely immune to the poison ailment, and with this build the poison ailment is so low and the raw attack so high that we don't really have to worry about a monster's elemental or ailment resistance. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons for this build is unfortunately, because we have no points in the guard skill, it means that we have to be comfortable in using our counter attacks, not only for survival, but to allow us to continuously attack a monster uninterrupted. Skills like Insta-Block and Anchor Rage are the two you need to master. And the final con for this build is, unfortunately, despite having Intrepid Heart, this build is lacking a little bit when it comes to defensive skills. But, like I said, if you master the counter attacks, this won't matter. Overall though, this build is great. It's a lot of fun to use if you enjoy playing the lance. And to be honest, when it comes to the lance, mastering the counter attacks is one of the most fun aspects. This, as you see with this build, allows you to forego skills like guard in favour of more quality of life skills or offensive skills. And for me, to be honest, this build was quite a surprise, as it was able to bring down even the toughest of afflicted monsters in relatively quick times, beating out some of the other weapons and some of the other builds I've even tried out. So if you're a lance player, or if you're looking to try out the lance and want a DPS build for it, I highly recommend this one. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you another endgame build, this time for the lance in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.